Continuing education, also known as CE, is important to advance your knowledge and skills, but also to renew your certificate and license. In this episode, I'm going to share with you 3 tips for continuing education for nurse practitioners. Hi, we're gonna get into today's topic in a minute. But before we're gonna dive into today's topic, I just wanna mention that we are giving out free access to our online workshop. This workshop is about confidence. We had this workshop and we got so many good responses, feedbacks from the audience. So I wanted to give it out to more people so that you can boost your confidence and get more career opportunity, get into your dream nurse practitioner programs, and get pay raises. How you can sign up and how you can get access to this workshop is go to a website, usa.jnpproject.com/confidence. Again, usa.jnpproject.com/confidence and sign up for our free email list. This is a 90-minute online workshop. You can watch it as many times as you want. It also comes with a handout of the slides that I used in the workshop. Again, a lot of people loved it. It really helps to boost your confidence. So I want you to have the opportunity. So please sign up. All right, let's get into today's episode. So today's episode is about what's continuing education for nurse practitioners and 3 tips for continuing education. Like I said in the beginning, continuing education is very important to keep your knowledge up to date, learn new things, new treatments, new diagnostic methods, but also it is very important to renew our license and certificates. In general, we renew Advanced Practice Registered Nurse or APRN license every 2 years, as well as in some states, Registered Nurse or RN license. On top of that, we also have Nurse Practitioner Certificate, which usually requires to renew every 5 years. And to renew Nurse Practitioner Certificate and APRN license, we usually need continuing education hours or CE hours. I'm actually in the process of renewing ANP Family Nurse Practitioner Certificate, and I thought of making this episode to help you to make this process less painful. So first tip is to check requirements to renew certificates and licenses. Requirements for renewing your certificates and licenses are different depending on where you practice and which organization you get the certificates from. I get my Family Nurse Practitioner Certificate from the ANP, American Association of Nurse Practitioners, and I need to renew my certificate every 5 years. For Family Nurse Practitioner Certificate, I need to have, during the last 5 years, I need to have 100 continuing education hours. And on top of that, out of 100 hours, at least 25 hours have to be pharmacology continuing education hours. You can also choose to take an exam to renew your license if you're certified by ANP, but that costs a little bit more, and then also you have to take exams. So I rather submit my continuing education hours. I think it's easier and cheaper. But one thing is that you want to prepare and manage your continuing education hours. Don't wait until the deadline close to renewing your certificate or license, because it's going to be stressful. You might be working full time, you might be having multiple jobs like I do, you might have family to take care of. It can take extra time if you haven't prepared well. First of all, let's make sure that what's required to renew your license and certificate, so you know how to prepare for when it comes to renewing your license or certificate. Second tip is to track continuing education CE activity hours using trackers. There are so many trackers available. I usually use the one by American Association of Nurse Practitioners, ANP. They provide, for a member, you can get the free access to the tracking service, and you can track what kind of continuing education you received, how many hours, and then also how many pharmacological hours. So that's really helpful. Usually, a lot of nurse practitioners find themselves getting enough continuing education hours. But what we struggle the most is the pharmacology hours, because not all the conferences, not all the online training provides you a lot of pharmacology hours. So remember to renew your FNP certificate by ANP. You have to have 25 pharmacology hours within the last 5 years. Start tracking your continuing education hours as soon as possible. If you're a nurse practitioner student, you don't need it right now, but as soon as you graduate, start tracking. Because initial certification, you don't need continuing education hours because you go to school, you learn so much, so that is considered. But when you're renewing your license or certificate, then you need those continuing education hours, including pharmacology hours. So as soon as you get licensed, to prepare for your renewal, start tracking your hours ASAP. And the service, the tracking system by ANP is amazing, so I would recommend to use that. Third tip is to get continuing education support from your employer. It is pretty standard to get allowance for continuing education from your employer. How much you can get for allowance for continuing education depends on employer, but it's on average it's ranging from $1,200 to $2,000. And you can use this allowance for register for continuing education conferences and courses, transportation from your home to the work conferences and coming back, for hotel fees, any dining during that trip. Also, some employers allow employees, nurse practitioners, to use that allowance for renewing license and certificates. But how you can use allowance depends on employers. So double check on that when you're doing job interview and see how much allowance you can get for continuing education. Is there any PTO that you can use to attend conference? For me, at my main job, I work 40 hours and I usually get 40 hours of paid time off specifically to use for continuing education on top of the allowance, which is pretty standard. So before you decide which job to take, that's something you might want to discuss with the HR person and see if you can get that benefit as well. And also if there's any restrictions, like some employers restrict what kind of conference or courses or training you can take. Another thing to add is many employers don't allow nurse practitioners to carry out the allowance or PTO for the next fiscal year. So basically, if you don't use it, then you lose it. So make sure you are aware of the deadline, by what day you're supposed to use the allowance, and also make sure you are aware by what day you're supposed to submit forms and stuff like that, so you can get reimbursement for the fee for the trip and attending conferences. Because if you miss the deadline, you might not get the reimbursement, and then also if you miss the deadline, you might not get allowance at all. So make sure what's the process of getting those continuing education allowance and PTO. I hope this video was helpful for you. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this kind of video. And would appreciate if you can write any comments, any questions, or requests for future episodes. All right, I'll see you in the next episode. Aloha.